Why is America so rich and powerful? Because it's not only about nice words like freedom, it's about maps, money, and timing. In this video, I will explain, step by step and in a way anyone can understand, how the United States of America, in this video I'll simply call it America, became a global superpower, from geography to war economy, from the dollar to technology. And at the end, I'll show where this power could start to crack. America's story begins with a geographic advantage that really feels like winning a cosmic lottery. The country is surrounded by two huge oceans, the Atlantic on one side and the Pacific on the other, and these massive water barriers worked like natural moats, protecting America for centuries from large invading land armies. They didn't make invasion impossible, but they made it extremely difficult and expensive, because moving millions of soldiers, thousands of vehicles, and tons of supplies across an ocean is both costly and risky. While European countries fought their neighbors for centuries, the American mainland faced far less of that kind of constant invasion threat. There's a long border with Canada in the north, but the two countries didn't experience the kind of continuous all-out wars seen in Europe. There's Mexico in the south, yet America's main great power rivals were often across the oceans. Now, if you ask, okay, there are oceans, but what about the inside? That's where the real magic is, the Mississippi River and its enormous basin. Think of it as a giant, low-cost transport network inside the country. Hauling heavy goods by truck is expensive, but river transport is much cheaper. When products, from corn to steel, from coal to timber, can move cheaply inside the country, costs fall. When costs fall, you sell more. When you sell more, factories grow. When factories grow, the country gets stronger. It may sound like boring logistics, but great powers often win with logistics before they win with guns and tanks. And America's luck doesn't stop with rivers. Fertile land, abundant fresh water, vast forests, coal, oil, natural gas, iron ore. Resources like these meant the need to depend on others for growth was lower. As external dependence decreases, resistance to outside pressure increases. That makes long-term strategy easier. And there's another point. America is not only big, it also managed to build a single, integrated internal market. One language, one legal system, and one customs area accelerated company growth. In Europe, one truck might mean 3 countries, 3 different taxes, 3 different rules, while inside America, you could sell into a huge market under the same rules. On top of that, millions of immigrants arrived in the 19th and 20th centuries. Some worked on farms, some in factories, some in science and engineering. Immigration brings not only population, but also skills, competition, and new ideas. That crowd created a massive consumer market. America could sell what it produced at home, and because it sold at home, it produced even more, creating a self-feeding growth cycle. And thanks to 2 oceans, it conducted foreign trade largely through secure ports. It built a powerful navy to protect maritime commerce. A navy isn't only a weapon of war, it's also like insurance for trade routes. If sea lanes are safe, trade flows. If trade flows, money grows. Here's a question for you. Do you think what makes a country rich is mostly good-intentioned speeches or the advantages on the map? Let's discuss in the comments. Now let's move to the second big piece, the World Wars. During World War I and World War II, while large parts of Europe and Asia were destroyed city by city, the war did not level the American mainland. Yes, there were attacks like Pearl Harbor, but the country's production heart, its factories, and much of its infrastructure remained standing. That means this: while other people's workshops burn down, yours keeps running. Everyone needs steel, machines, trucks, ships, and food to rebuild, and you produce and sell them. America did exactly that. Weapons, ammunition, vehicles, food, industrial goods. It sold them, and often it didn't do this only for cash, but through lending and financing, meaning America became not only the world's factory, but also the world's bank. Before the wars, it was a debtor in some areas. After the wars, it rose into the position of a major creditor. Being a creditor isn't just having money in the safe. It also means others are using your money and are more likely to move under your rules. The official story often says, America saved the world. Of course, the fight against Nazi Germany was a critical part of history, but this period was also a huge window of opportunity for America's economic leap. And after the war, it wasn't everyone for themselves. Programs like the Marshall Plan sent resources to Europe. This had a humanitarian side, but also a strategic one. If Europe stands up again, it becomes a customer for America's products. And if Europe doesn't fall fully under Soviet influence, America's security increases. In the same era, institutions like the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank gained power. On paper, they were common rules for the world. But in practice, one of the strongest weights at the table was America. So the order was built not only with tanks, but also with institutions. The third part, the money side of the game, is maybe the most critical. After the war, the question became, how do we conduct so much trade safely? And in 1944, the Bretton Woods system was established. Simply put, the dollar was accepted as convertible into gold, and other countries' currencies were tied to the dollar at certain rates. So the dollar became the reference currency at the center of the system. The result was this. Countries began to hold their reserves, meaning the safe money they keep on the side, largely in dollars. To use the neighborhood example, everyone trusts your voucher the most and saves your voucher. This gives America a huge advantage, because when the language of trade is the dollar doesn't circulate only inside America. It circulates around the world. Over time, the dollar's convertibility into gold became unsustainable, and the system changed. But America now had another lever. Energy. Oil is like the blood of the modern world, everywhere from transportation to industry, from plastics to agriculture. Through the security energy balance it built especially with Saudi Arabia, and through its weight in global markets, America helped form an arrangement that strengthened the dollar's dominant role in oil trade. This is called the petrodollar system. This is not a single-sentence law like oil can only be sold in dollars, but in practice it is a habit and a network effect that increased the dollar's weight in oil trade and created constant demand for dollars. The outcome: many countries that wanted to buy oil needed to obtain dollars first. To get dollars, they sold goods to America, borrowed or accumulated reserves. This gives America an uncomfortable privilege. If its currency is used so widely worldwide, America can be more flexible than other countries when buying goods and services from abroad. Important warning: this is not a magical, infinite money machine. It has limits like inflation, trust, political stability, and market reaction. Still, being close to the side that writes the rules at the start of the game is a major advantage. The power of the dollar is not only about banknotes, it's a network. Because a large share of world trade runs through dollars, international interbank payment instructions also flow largely through dollar-centered channels. These channels are like the nervous system of world trade. Because America is close to the network's key nodes, it can use sanctions strongly. If a country's dollar transactions become difficult, its trade can start to feel short of breath. Also, U.S. Treasury bonds, meaning the government's debt securities, have long been seen as the world's safe parking lot. In a crisis, many investors prefer to move money there, which helps America borrow at lower cost. And this is where the famous boring language of finance comes in. Interest, bonds, reserve currency, Liquidity, meaning easy access to money. It's often spoken about like a spell only experts can understand, because it's hard to object to what you don't understand. I'm not selling you fancy terms. The simple logic is this: who trusts whom, and who prints the money of the game? Here's another question. If you were in charge of the currency that everyone is forced to use, would you realize how big that power is? The fourth piece: technology and the military-industrial complex. It's a long term. The short meaning is this: a state that allocates massive budgets for defense, the companies that receive that money, and the university lab research world that works with them. Together, they form an ecosystem. During the Cold War, competition between America and the Soviet Union turned into a who is stronger race. But this race wasn't only with rockets and tanks. It also ran through computers, communications, satellites, and materials science. The state spent huge sums for security. That money accelerated research. As a result, technologies like the Internet, the Global Positioning System, GPS, and digital communication infrastructure accelerated significantly. Microchips didn't appear for a single reason, but defense demand and state-supported research helped them develop and spread at incredible speed. There's no romantic story here. Even in the Internet's early logic, there was a motivation as much about communication shouldn't be cut, and the network should keep working even if parts fail, as about people should chat. Sometimes the technology that improves the world is a byproduct of harsh competition. Another outcome of this ecosystem is a global military network. America built bases in many regions and formed alliances. Through structures like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, it took a central place in European security. Think of aircraft carriers as floating airports. You can move air power near the coast of almost any continent. This is used not only to fight wars, but also to keep trade routes and choke points secure. If sea lanes are safe, global trade flows. If global trade flows, the network of the dollar and major companies grows. On the technology side, centers like Silicon Valley turned early state research into fast private sector products. Venture capital funds could turn a good idea into a giant company quickly. Universities, patents, brain drain, and entrepreneurial culture accelerated the path from research to product. The fifth piece: soft power. Hard power is tanks, planes, and navies. Soft power is being seen as attractive. Hollywood films, pop music, brands, fast food culture. These are not only products. They're a lifestyle package. Even if people criticize a country politically, they may still watch its movies, listen to its music, and wear its brands. That's a way of crossing borders without building military bases. And today, soft power has taken a new form: a digital empire. Search engines like Google, social network giants like Meta, and e-commerce and cloud computing behemoths like Amazon. When these become the infrastructure of daily life, influence goes beyond physical armies. If a country's companies can heavily shape what people in other countries watch, buy, which news they see, and which ads they click, that's no longer only economics. That's influence. The official story often waves it away as the free market. But the clear question is, whoever controls the digital roads of the world, who sets the rules of those roads? Data, people's behavioral traces, is talked about like the new oil, because data makes it easier to predict and steer behavior. That's why the digital age is not only faster internet, it's a bigger power game. The rise of English as a global common language also expanded America's cultural impact. When so much content, from science to entertainment, circulates in English, America-centered production and distribution networks gain a natural advantage. Through scholarship programs and universities, America attracted talent from all over the world. Some returned, some stayed. the pool of knowledge grew even more. Now let's be honest, there's a hard side to this rise as well. America has sometimes been ruthless in its geopolitical moves. Coups, regime changes, sanctions, covert operations. Great powers tend to stretch the word morality when they see an interest. When you say this, some people immediately shout, conspiracy. I'm not telling you a fairy tale. I'm only saying this. Global leadership is often a mix of morality plus interest. And inside that mix, the fate of other countries is also involved. Do you think this is the nature of the system, or can it change? Now to the most critical warning. There's no rule that says America will go on like this forever. Every great power faces a test. For America today, there are three big warning lights. First, massive national debt. As debt grows, interest payments grow. As interest payments grow, resources for education, infrastructure, and health get squeezed, and society gets tired from the inside. Second, risks related to the dollar's reserve currency status. In recent years, a trend called de-dollarization has been discussed. Some countries want to rely less on the dollar in trade and are trying deals using their own currencies or other currencies. This does not mean the dollar ends tomorrow. Being a reserve currency requires deep trust and deep market liquidity. But if the habit of seeking alternatives grows, it's a long-term risk. Third, domestic political polarization. If a country looks strong outside but keeps fighting inside, decision-making slows. Shared goals erode, trust in institutions falls. And that affects everything from foreign policy to the economy. And now, a dystopian projection. Imagine we go to 2035. If the debt problem grows, the dollar's global role slowly erodes, and polarization hardens. The world's police role becomes more expensive and more controversial. Defense spending becomes a constant domestic political battlefield. Tension between tech giants and the state increases. The world shifts into a more fragmented order. In that fragmented order, regional powers act more boldly, trade lines become more fragile, energy and food prices become more volatile. If we extend to 2010, along with huge stress tests like climate pressure and migration waves, power is measured not only by armies, but by water, food, energy, and technological infrastructure. America's advantages may still be strong, but no advantage is infinite. A small note, what I'm explaining here is not financial advice. I'm not telling you what to buy or sell. My goal is to make the game understandable, because if you don't understand the game, someone will decide for you and you'll only watch what happens. When we combine all the pieces, the answer becomes clear. First, America gained a safe fortress and a cheap internal transport network through geography. Second, because its mainland wasn't destroyed in the world wars, it rose into the position of the world's factory and bank by producing and selling. Third, with a Bretton Woods system, it moved to the center of a dollar-based order and created a network that strengthened the dollar's dominance in energy trade. Fourth, the Cold War's massive budgets seriously accelerated technologies like the Internet, GPS, and digital communications, and greatly sped up microchips and advanced industry. Fifth, through soft power, from Hollywood to digital platforms, it built an influence that spreads into people's minds and everyday habits. But my final question is this. If this power stands on many pillars like geography plus money plus technology plus culture, which pillar, in your view, would trigger the fastest domino effect if it starts to crack? Debt, the dollar, technology, or domestic polarization? Write one word in the comments. Debt, dollar, technology, or polarization. And in the next video, I'll break down the most written scenario with forensic level rigor. Who wins? Who loses? Which countries see opportunity? Which societies pay the price? Because in history, power often moves not with good-intentioned sentences, but with cold facts. And if we don't understand those cold facts, the people who understand the system will assume we're the easiest crowd to steer.